I think that when you look at the expansion of this world, you see the ineluctable power, the endurance, and the appeal of it. It started, as I said, without the great Soviet Empire. It started without most of the Third World. But then by the 50s and 60s, countries began to realize that in order to grow fast, you needed to be part of it. And so Japan and Taiwan and South Korea start to come in. And then Latin American countries start to join in. And then, of course, you have the collapse of the Soviet Union, the collapse of communism, and all of a sudden, the entire world becomes part of this system. So the free trading system, the so-called GATT, had 70 countries, 78 countries in 1970. It now has 170. If you look at the European Union, which had 6 countries in 1970, it has 28 now, 27 when they kick out Neil's and Britain, but still an enormous expansion from that time. This is the way in which all these groups have grown, and they include most powerfully, of course, the new rising and emerging powers in Asia. Neil talks about who this order has empowered. Well, I'll tell you who it has empowered more than anybody else. It has empowered the poorest people in the world. The United States Nations calculates that in the last 50 years, we have taken more people out of poverty than in the preceding 500. And that is principally because countries like India and China were able to grow and raise their living standards and allow peasants who were living on $1 a day to move out of poverty. I know this world well because my father was a politician. His constituency was largely rural. There were 1,000 villages in it. When you went to India 30, 40 years ago, and you went into those villages, people lived lives that looked as if they were from the Middle Ages. And today, when you go to those places, it is a world transformed. They have food, they have medicine, they have shelter. It's not luxury by any standards, but it is the difference between living on $1 a day and living on $3 or $4 a day. And that transformation has taken place in India, in China, it has taken place in Latin America, it has taken place in other parts of Asia, and it is beginning to take place in Africa. Those are the people who have most powerfully benefited from this new liberal international order. But others have as well. It is not as though the United States has been standing still. US GDP is up 1,000% since 1970. European GDP is not up quite that much, but if you go to any of these countries, you are struck by the fact that they are rich societies. There is a problem with inequality. There is a problem with how this wealth has been redistributed. And there is the reality that people are culturally anxious when they see so much change as there has been in the last 30 years. We have globalized very fast, and we have had enormous amounts of immigration, and women have been emancipated. All these changes produce cultural anxiety, and they make people want to go back to a simpler time, to make America great again, to make Britain great again. But you know what? These countries have been great because they led and spearheaded this liberal international order. They have found a way to allow the world to share in this extraordinary dream that Franklin Roosevelt had, that he talked to Mackenzie King about. It is a dream that brought Peter Munk from Hungary, fleeing persecution, here. It's a dream that brought me from India to the United States to make a family and a life for myself. It is a world that allowed Neil Ferguson to leave Scotland and then Britain and then come to the United States and fall in love with a woman who was born in Somalia and fled to go to Holland to find freedom there, and then to the United States. It is where they have had their son, a beautiful boy named Thomas. Tiny Thomas, Neil calls him. I think that Thomas's future rests on an open, plural, diverse, cosmopolitan world where people think of you based on the content of your character, not the color of your skin. I think that is the world that Neil secretly believes is powerful, deep, and enduring. Otherwise, he would not have voted with his feet and moved to the United States and moved to Palo Alto, because he knows that that is where they are inventing the future, and he wants to be a part of it. So what I say to you, Neil Ferguson, is come home. Come home to the liberal international order. Come home to the liberal international order that has been so good to you and that will be so good to your son, Thomas.